World Summit. The 60th anniversary of the UN was a major occasion. General Assembly attended at head of state and government level by 150 heads, and with a huge exercise of preparing reform proposals, including the structure of the Security Council and so on. Very little was achieved by that 2005 summit. It was deeply disappointing in all sorts of ways. But one spectacular thing that was achieved, much against most people's expectations, was agreement to embrace this principle of the responsibility to protect. Now, what was distinctive about it? We made a linguistic shift. The right to intervene became the responsibility, much softer word, to protect. The word protect implying a focus on the victims. And you started to see practical examples of the application of the doctrine. I suppose none more encouraging than in Kenya in 2008, where you may remember there was a contested election which blew up almost immediately into major interethnic violence, and almost immediately in the world's press, even though it was over the Christmas-New Year period. This got really headline attention. The language of responsibility to protect was invoked. And very quickly you had a major diplomatic initiative mounted by a combination of the UN and the African Union, with Kofi Annan going there leading a diplomatic mission designed to get the main ethnic leaders together and get them to calm down their respective communities and to find a way through this. It was a classic example of a quick reactive response which did not in fact involve military action, involved diplomatic. The Libya case was a textbook case of what we all hoped responsibility to protect would be about. Not in the sense of working through the preventive strategies first, because it all exploded so quickly in the context of the Arab Spring, and there was no real opportunity to anticipate what would occur. All prepared to believe that this was a mass atrocity crime situation in the making. There had to be action. And the truth of the matter is that if the Security Council had acted anything like as robustly back in those 1990s cases, you would have had 8,000 men and boys alive to this day. In Srebrenica, you would have had 800,000, many of them still alive in Rwanda today. It was a very, very successful action. But what happened is that basically the P3 leading the charge in the Security Council and key members of NATO made clear that they were content with nothing less than complete regime change. Despite a number of the other countries on the Security Council saying, hey, we've averted the crisis in Benghazi, there's talk of Gaddafi possibly being willing to accept a ceasefire negotiation, possibly to talk about a political transition. The South Africans and others were anxiously pursuing this. The P3 basically said, no, not interested. Go jump. We're not even going to talk about this in the Security Council. The BRICS countries basically got very unhappy with the way the whole thing had been handled. And crucially, that unhappiness was reflected in the response to the Syrian situation, which erupted about exactly the same time, exactly the same sequence of events, but there was no voice, no capacity in the Security Council to produce any kind of a resolution. My view, and I think the view of many commentators and analysts, is that the complete failure of the Security Council, the complete failure to do that, gave Assad a huge sense of impunity, a huge sense that really he could get away with anything. And he did. The question is, has the whole Responsibility to Protect project been irreversibly tarnished by this manifest failure to make any impact in a really critical situation? And maybe I'm just naive about this, maybe I'm demented, but I genuinely don't believe that anyone really wants to go back to the bad old days of the 1990s and previously, when basically there was no consensus about anything.